Introducing ORIA Mini, the compact yet powerful room correction system. In this tutorial video, we're going to look at how to get you set up and started, beginning with covering getting connected, then looking at how to use the Sonarworks integration with SoundID Reference, then taking a deep dive into the software and how to get the most out of Oria Control, Stream Deck integration and the Oria iPad app. Firstly, let's get ORIA Mini out of the box and connected. In the box, you'll find ORIA Mini, a SoundID Reference measurement microphone, a quick start guide, and a USB-C to C cable. ORIA Mini can be used with a USB-C to A cable as long as the power source that is connected can supply enough power. For the initial setup, plug ORIA Mini into a computer, either using Windows or Mac OS. After a few seconds, it should boot and light up. Go to Audient.com and go to the product page for ORIA Mini, and click on the link for downloads. Download the latest version of the Oria Control software. On Windows, run through the install process as guided by the prompts. On Mac OS, open the downloaded file and drag the Oria Control icon into the Applications folder. Open the Oria Control software and you may be prompted and informed that your firmware is out of date and needs to be updated. Follow the instructions on screen, choosing to download the latest firmware from Audient.com, and the firmware updater will walk you through the process, restarting the ORIA Mini unit upon completion. At this point, disconnect the ORIA Mini units from power and connect your audio source and monitors. The audio input can be connected via the TRS jacks or the SP-Diff input, and the outputs are connected via TRS connections to your monitor speakers, including the optional sub output. It is important to note that ORIA Mini is not a USB audio interface. It is designed to be fed audio from an external source such as an audio interface or other audio source such as a hi-fi system. Once everything is connected, reconnect the USB cable to the computer and open Oria Control. Make sure the volume is set to an appropriate level and that the correct input is selected at the top left of the app. And play back an audio test from your source. In this example, we're going to use an audio interface to confirm your signal chain is working properly. If not, recheck your workflow to see if your audio interface is turned up to provide signal, ORIA Mini's volume is up to pass audio through, and your speakers are properly connected and powered on. If using the volume control of an external device to control your monitor volume, Audient recommends setting the speaker volume of ORIA Mini to 0 dB and then setting your external device volume appropriately. At this point, make a new profile with the plus button found in the Speaker Profiles section and name it accordingly. If you are intending to use the sub output with this profile, press the Setup button found on the right-hand side of the Oria Control app and the advanced setup parameters will appear. Make sure your subwoofer is connected according to the guidance from the manufacturer. The subwoofer will be set up with the bass management feature using the crossover dials in Oria Control. Click on the left speaker and its attributes will appear on the right-hand side. Press the button next to the crossover dial, turning it to the on position. Now, any frequencies below 100 Hz will not be produced through the left speaker, but will instead be redirected to the sub output. Play audio to test and you should hear low frequencies coming from your subwoofer. Repeat this process with the right speaker by clicking on the right speaker icon, then turning on the crossover at the bottom right. If your sub is too loud or too quiet, firstly adjust the level on the subwoofer as appropriate where possible. If there is still a small level discrepancy, click on the sub icon on the left side of the app, and on the right panel there is a trim control which can be used to adjust the level of the sub independently. Also, if you would like to adjust where the subwoofer takes over handling the low frequencies, simply adjust the crossover frequency for the left and right speakers until the subwoofer is performing as desired. We recommend setting the crossover filter as the setting your speaker manufacturer recommends. At this point, save your profile by pressing the Save icon that has appeared next to its name in the Speaker Profiles panel on the left side. This will change to a saving icon, then a green tick to indicate that this setup has now been saved to the ORIA Mini hardware. Now your ORIA Mini is ready to be used, but first your room needs to be calibrated. If doing this via manual methods, skip ahead to the software section, timestamps are in the description. If using the Sonarworks SoundID Reference integration, we will cover that process now. At this point, we will walk through the setup process for the SoundID Reference measurement app and how to export your measurements to ORIA Mini. Firstly, you will need to go to sonarworks.com, sign up through the login icon at the top right of the homepage, pressing Sign Up. Once you have completed the process, go to the My Account section at the top right of the homepage once logged in, and press the Register a New License button. Here you can register the serial key that you have for either the complete bundle or the add-on. This will provide you with a download link for SoundID Reference and also a button to activate the license to the computer you are using. Activate the license, download and install the software. SoundID Reference comes with two apps, the SoundID Reference Measure app, which is used to capture the measurements of your speakers and room, and the SoundID Reference app, which is used separately to implement the measurements taken and, in the case of ORIA Mini, export the final results to the Oria Control app. The Sonarworks SoundID Measurement app is designed to be as simple as possible and walk you through the automated measurement process. This measurement process only has to be done once unless your room setup changes. For instance, if you change your speakers for a different type, or drastically move the equipment in the room around, such as moving the entire mix position and desk, or installing heavy objects like acoustic treatment panels or a sofa. Make sure if using a subwoofer that ORIA Mini is set up to provide bass management as desired before making measurements, as described in the previous section, Getting Connected. Note that ORIA Mini will only work with the measurements from a stereo capture and not from a dedicated 2.1 capture if you have a SoundID multi-channel license. The bass management is handled internally in ORIA Mini, so set crossovers before measuring as a stereo capture, as mentioned previously. You will need an audio interface with a microphone input capable of delivering 48-volt phantom power, a microphone cable, and the supplied SoundID Reference measurement microphone. Ensure you connect to the measurement microphone and engage phantom power, and also make sure that your audio routing is not set to route the sound from your microphone straight through the speakers, as this will cause feedback and disrupt the measurement process. If your listening position has a chair, remove this chair for the duration of the measurement process. Make sure the room is as quiet as possible during the measurement for best results. This may mean shutting windows or turning off air conditioning and loud electronics. The SoundID Measurement app will now walk you through the steps of setting the speaker level, then setting the microphone gain, measuring the listening position and each speaker's behaviour, before moving to the in-depth measurement stage where 37 positions are captured. Point the microphone forward at the centre spot between the two speakers and move the microphone as indicated on screen. Once this process is complete, you'll be prompted to save these measurements as a file. Go ahead and do so. We advise making a backup of this file to save on measuring again in the future with a different computer setup. You can now close the SoundID Reference Measure app. The next step is to open up the SoundID Reference app and click Add New Output in the bottom left corner, adding the outputs on your interface that were used in the measurement process. Go to Select Your Calibration profile at the top of the window, and your new measurement file should be in this list. If not, select the Open an Existing Profile option and select your measurement file from here. You should now hear your reference tracks being corrected through the measurement process, and by default this will be set to a flat target, so your audio will be sonically even across the audio spectrum at the listening position. You may wish to manipulate the results from here using the Custom Target. Select Custom Target and EQ points will appear over the measurement. You can add EQ points as needed, including a low shelf and a high shelf, and these will combine with the room measurement to give corrected audio with the desired tonal characteristics. It is also possible to prevent the low or high frequencies from being processed. To do this, drag the pink bars from the left and right of the measurement to the point where you wish for the correction to begin. You can also press the marker button in the EQ drop-down to invert this system and prevent a certain frequency range in the mid-range from being corrected. It is also possible at this point to use the translation check function, selecting a preset from cars, laptops, smartphones, and more sources to simulate the frequency response of those bandwidth-limited devices, overlaid on the room correction. Click on the preset name on the right side of the lower panel to reveal categories and presets for these device tonalities. Once your target curve is set, it can now be exported to ORIA Mini. Firstly, make sure the Oria Control app is open in the background. To export the SoundID Reference profile, click on the button marked Export Preset to Device at the bottom left of the panel. This will bring up a dialog box with device options, select Audient Oria Mini, and select Direct Transfer to Oria Control software. The Oria Control software will take over, and a dialog box will appear whilst the measurement is transferred across the applications. Once this is complete, a new dialog box will appear prompting you to import the profile. Choose between creating a new profile and overwriting an existing profile. Creating a new profile will prompt for a name, whilst overwriting a profile will give you a choice of which profile to replace, which can be confirmed in the next pop-up. In the SoundID Reference app, a dialog box will appear confirming the successful export, and give the option of disabling the processing within SoundID Reference, as Oria Mini can now apply the correction from within the hardware. You can now quit the SoundID Reference software if it is no longer needed in your workflow. If using a subwoofer, the SoundID Reference profile sent to Oria Control will now need the bass management to be set to the same values as you set before the measurement process. This is the same as before in the Setup panel under Crossover. However, SoundID imported profiles have this control locked for safety, so press the Locked button to unlock this control, turn on the crossover and set it to the desired point. Repeat this process for both channels, then when done, an icon will appear next to the profile's name denoting that changes need to be saved. Click on this icon and wait for it to turn into the green tick icon. This profile is now set up for full range correction with a subwoofer. If Oria Mini is intended to be used in a situation where it is not connected to a computer, during the profile transfer stage, the USB-C port must be connected to a computer with the SoundID Reference app and Oria Control. But once the profile transfer is complete, Oria Mini can now be used in a standalone state with an external power supply. The USB-C connection to a computer is only necessary for control data, such as remote control via the Oria Control app and profile transfer. In this section, we're going to deep dive into all the features of the Oria Control software when connected to Oria Mini. This is the main screen of Oria Control. At the top left of Oria Control, you will find the monitoring panel. Here we can see the input source. Using the input source drop-down menu, we can choose which input feeds Oria Mini, whether selecting the TRS analog inputs or optical SPDIF port. Next, the main output volume control is found here alongside global mute and dim controls, mono and polarity. This allows you to check your mixes for phase and mono compatibility at the press of a button. Moving over to the metering panel, we can see the output level metering, including pre- and post-metering options. Pre shows us the stereo audio levels straight from the input, and post mode shows us audio levels after calibration, processing and master volume control, and includes the sub as its own meter. The metering panel can also be expanded, enabling you to use the expanded metering window independently of the main app window. The expanded metering window provides you with an expanded view and more detail, allowing you to keep a closer eye on your metering. Below the metering panel, we have the room panel. Here we can see our 2.1 speaker array as if viewed from an aerial position. This is a visual representation of your speaker's positions in the room, with each speaker being identified with a circular speaker icon. Positioned around the user as denoted by the white user icon found in the center of the section. You can use the speaker icons to both mute or solo that specific speaker. To mute a speaker, click on the speaker icon to toggle mute on and off. When a speaker has been muted, it will fade to grey in the room view to denote a mute status. To solo a speaker, use the shortcut Shift and click on the speaker icon to solo or unsolo the speaker. When at least one speaker has been put into solo mode, the selected icon speaker will change to have a stroked outline and look like this. If any speakers are in solo mode, all other speakers are muted. Whilst the speaker is in solo mode, a user cannot mute any other speaker or speaker group. It is worth noting that you can also solo multiple speakers simultaneously using the Shift and click shortcut as shown here. If audio is playing and being sent to a speaker, the speaker icon will have a wave animation denoting that sound is coming from that speaker, so if there's no wave, there's no sound. This is useful for checking input signals from your audio device. If you would like to remove all active solos simultaneously, simply hold Option or Alt and click any soloed speaker. This will remove all active solo states across all speakers and speaker groups. The same is applicable for removing all active mute states. Simply hold down Option or Alt and click any muted speaker. To the left of the room panel you will find the Groups panel. As you can see, color coding allows you to quickly identify a group of speakers, and these are organized into stereo and sub. When a group is muted, the speakers icons within that group will become grey in the room panel to denote that these speakers have been muted. When the stereo group is soloed, that group's speaker icons will change in the room panel to have stroked outlines. If a speaker or speaker group is soloed, all other speakers are muted. Next, we have the Profiles panel. Profiles are the heart of the Oria Control philosophy. When we select a profile, we are selecting all of the calibration parameters for every channel, all in one button press. This allows you to quickly switch between profiles which have been created for different monitoring formats or target modes. A total of 32 profiles can be stored on Oria Mini itself. It is worth noting that although profiles are stored directly on Oria Mini's hardware, they are controlled using the Profiles panel or the Profile button on the front of the unit. At the top of the Profiles panel there are 4 favorite slots, and when using the dedicated Profiles button on the front of Oria Mini, a tap of the button will cycle through these 4 favorites profiles. If you have more profiles than the 4 favorites, non-favorite profiles are presented in a list below the dividing line as shown here. The order of profiles can be changed by selecting a profile in the menu, holding down the mouse button and dragging the profile to the desired position. When dragging a favorite profile to another favorite profile slot, these 2 profiles will directly swap places, allowing you to quickly reorder your favorites by preference. When dragging a non-favorite profile from below the dividing line into one of the favorite slots, the selected profile will replace the profile in the numbered favorite slot where the cursor landed. The pre-existing favorite profile will move down below the dividing line and will then be found at the top of the non-favorite list below. When dragging a favorite profile from above the dividing line down into the non-favorite list, the selected profile will land in the non-favorite list where you drop it. The non-favorite profile at the top of the non-favorite list will then move up into the lowest slot of the favorites list, shuffling any remaining favorite profiles upwards. When dragging a non-favorite profile to another slot in the non-favorite list, the profile will land where you drop it, and non-favorite profiles below will shuffle down 1 space. There are 2 types of profiles, manual profiles and SoundID Reference profiles. The SoundID Reference profiles are denoted with the SoundID icon. You are not required to work with one or the other exclusively. Both manual and SoundID Reference profiles can be imported into the Oria Control app and switched between at your leisure. SoundID Reference profiles that are created and exported to Oria Mini will only do so if the serial number of the Oria Mini matches your serial number for the SoundID Reference stereo and headphone license with Oria Mini add-on. Once profiles are exported to Oria Mini successfully, they will continue to work indefinitely even if the computer is not connected to the Oria Mini. To create a new profile, click the plus button found in the top right of the Profiles panel. Name your profile and hit Save. This will create a blank profile with all the correction parameters reset, including bass management being turned off. You are now ready to start entering calibration parameters. Profiles can either be created manually or using SoundID Reference from Sonarworks. To duplicate an existing profile, right-click on a profile name in the Profile panel and select Duplicate. A copy of the profile will appear at the bottom of the profile list. To rename a profile, right-click on the profile name in the Profile panel and select Rename. A cursor will appear enabling you to edit the text. Type the new name and press Enter when done. To delete a profile, right-click on the profile name in the Profile panel and select Delete. A window will appear asking you to confirm your deletion. When you make changes to a profile by muting or soloing speakers, changing the EQ parameters, level trims, per speaker delay or bass management settings, and you either go to close the app or change to a different profile, a dialog window will appear prompting you to save these changes. Save commits these changes before changing to the new profile, Don't Save discards changes before changing to the new profile, and Cancel keeps all changes and halts the profile change process. If you have made changes to a profile, a save icon will also appear next to the profile name, allowing you to save your changes manually. To do this, press this save icon, wait while the profile saves, and once complete, a green tick icon will appear, denoting that the changes have been saved. It is worth noting, when you save a profile, you are directly saving it to Oria Mini's hardware. Now we have covered the main control panels, let's take a look at Oria Control's menu bar. Firstly, there is a button to change between light and dark modes useful for accessibility. This is signified by the dark and light circle. Next is the global bypass button, which quickly turns off all the calibration so you can hear everything Oria Mini is doing to calibrate your speakers and room. Disabling the EQ on every speaker, all per speaker delays and trim settings. This will not disable bass management. The Setup button opens the setup panel and the room view moves over to make space for a new section, and this is where we set our calibration features. On the room panel here, we can see that a speaker has now indicated that it is selected by an expanded speaker icon, and correspondingly all of the controls in the setup panel will affect this specific speaker. We can see here at the top left of the setup panel confirmation of which speaker we are currently working with. Here in the middle of the setup panel, we can see 6 bands of EQ, a high shelf and a low shelf. Each one of these EQ bands can be moved by clicking on its visual indicator, holding down the mouse button and dragging the dot around. Alternatively, once the band has been selected with the mouse button, we can adjust the 3 controls below: frequency, gain and Q. We can adjust these controls by clicking and dragging with the mouse button, or we can also double click on any of these controls to manually input a value if we already have specific values that we wish to input into the calibration fields. The EQ can be bypassed by clicking the EQ bypass button. Clicking the undo button will step the EQ back by 1 value, and the redo button will restore the input value sequentially. If you are using a profile imported from SoundID Reference Measure, the EQ panel will show the resulting EQ curve as imported from SoundID Reference, but the EQ controls will be locked, and below the EQ will be the Sonarworks Calibrated EQ text. At the bottom of the setup panel, there are 3 further controls for speaker calibration. The first control is Trim, which raises or lowers the level of this speaker by up to 12 decibels in increments of 0.1 decibel. Click and drag this control to either add or remove trim from this speaker. Alternatively, double-click on the control to input a numeric value. The second control is Delay, which delays the signal from this speaker by a defined amount of time. This is useful in time aligning speaker signals to arrive at the listener from each speaker at the same time for optimal immersive imaging. The delay control has a range from 0 milliseconds to 75 milliseconds in increments of 0.01 millisecond. Click and drag this control to add delay to the speaker signal. Alternatively, double-click the control to manually enter a numeric value. The delay control also has a separate on button to engage the delay. The third control is Crossover, and this is for configuring bass management. When engaged by clicking the on-off button, bass management is now enabled for this speaker. This means that audio frequencies that had been sent to this speaker channel below the defined frequency value seen in the control will be removed from this signal path and instead redirected to the subwoofer channel. This is important in audio systems where the individual speakers may not be able to faithfully recreate lower bass frequencies, and so redirecting these lower frequencies to the subwoofer may provide a more optimal experience. Click and drag this control to define the crossover frequency, below which audio will be sent to the subwoofer and above which the audio will be sent to the defined speaker channel. Alternatively, double-click on the control to manually enter a frequency value. With a SoundID reference profile, these 3 controls will be locked by default and can be unlocked by pressing the button on the right-hand side labelled Locked. This will then enable each control to be configured. It is important to note that with a manual profile, any frequency sent to the sub via the crossover control will not be subject to the EQ curve on the left and right channels. This audio is sent to the sub before any processing, and so the sub channel's individual EQ, trim and delay controls will take effect. With a SoundID reference profile, the bass frequencies are affected by the overall left and right correction curves and are sent to the sub as a post-processed effect. As long as the base management settings and sub-trim level are the same as the profile used when the measurements were made, the new SoundID reference profile will behave as expected. At the top of the setup panel are controls for this speaker, starting with mute and solo. Click mute to disable output from this speaker. The mute icon will become light, and the corresponding speaker icon in the room panel will become a dark grey to indicate a speaker mute. Click on the solo button to engage solo mode for this speaker. The solo button will become light, and in the room panel the corresponding speaker icon will have become a coloured outline to indicate speaker solo mode, and the wave representing audio will also become the colour of the respective channel. If solo mode was previously engaged for another speaker, the icon for the currently selected speaker will become outlined in addition to any speakers already in solo mode. The copy button will copy all of the EQ, trim, delay and bass management settings for this speaker into memory, and the paste button will overwrite the EQ, trim, delay and bass management settings from any channel where these settings were previously copied. The reset button will restore the EQ, trim, delay and bass management to factory settings for that specific channel. The bypass button at the top of the setup panel will disable all the calibration DSP applied for this particular speaker, including the EQ, trim, delay and bass management. The EQ bypass button below keeps trim, delay and bass management active so you can compare the speaker signal with or without EQ processing without affecting the rest of the calibration controls. The system button at the top of Oria Control lets us look under the hood at the more advanced settings for connectivity and control. Starting in the general panel, monitoring preferences is where the dim settings can be changed to define how many decibels the monitoring volume is decreased by when pressing the dim button, either in the Oria Control app or remotely via the Oria Control iPad app or Stream Deck. Click and drag the control to change the amount from -40 decibels to 0 decibels. Alternatively, double-click the control and manually enter a value in the text field that appears. Below this is the crossover attenuation. This controls whether the level being sent to the sub-channel is reduced by a set amount, from 0 dB for full signal to -10 dB, which may be preferable for certain system setups. At the bottom is the global delay control, which can be used to delay the audio coming from ORIA Mini to synchronize the output with another source, such as a video feed. This control ranges from 0 to 100 milliseconds. The remote panel is where you will find connections to the Oria Control iPad remote app. On the left are approved devices through the connection dialog that appears when connecting the app, and on the right are devices that have been blocked to prevent dialog windows and connections from these devices. This may be useful in a multi-user network with several Oria Mini setups to avoid controlling another user's Oria Mini device. In this section, we will cover connecting the Oria Mini iPad remote app and Stream Deck to the Oria Control desktop app for flexible control at your fingertips. Firstly, let's look at setting up the Oria iPad remote app. Firstly, make sure the Oria Control software is installed as outlined in the Getting Connected section of this video. If you have just installed the Oria Control desktop app, before you can successfully connect the iPad app, you will need to restart your computer to ensure that the updated app can connect to the iPad over the network. You will only need to do this after the initial installation. Next, download the Oria iPad Remote from the App Store. There is a link in the description and on the Oria Mini downloads page on the Audient website, but it is also possible to search on the App Store for Audient Oria iPad Remote. This is still a free download, but may still require your Apple ID for installation permissions. Once the iPad app has been downloaded and installed, make sure your computer and iPad are connected to the same network, either by Wi-Fi or Ethernet connection, and launch the iPad app. You will be presented with a first use guide, which gives you a brief tour of the app and its core functionality. You can either click next to cycle through the demonstration or skip entirely using the options presented on screen. Once you have exited the first use guide, you will be presented with the home screen, and we need to connect the Oria iPad remote to the Oria Mini unit itself using the network page, found at the bottom left of the sidebar menu. In this page, you will be able to see your computer's Oria Mini connection. To connect, click on the desired Oria Mini in the list. Upon selecting your desktop connection from the connectivity menu, a dialog box will appear on the Oria Control desktop app, asking you to accept the incoming connection. This confirmation step is designed to prevent unauthorized access to your Oria hardware, and here we can see an option to block a device. In this case, press accept. Once this is confirmed, you can go to the Oria Control desktop app system menu and go to the remote section. Here you can see approved devices and also blocked devices, useful for separating ORIA Mini connections on the same network. On the iPad remote app, a dialog box will appear prompting you to save the connection so that future sessions with the iPad remote app will connect automatically. Go back to the app's homepage to see controls for volume, profiles, metering, speaker control, and that's it. You can now control ORIA Mini from your iPad. In this section, we will set up a Stream Deck control device to control ORIA Mini through the Oria Control app and Stream Deck app working together for flexible yet powerful control. Firstly, if you have not installed the Stream Deck software on your computer, find the installer on the Elgato website and follow the steps. Then connect your Stream Deck unit or mobile device with Stream Deck app to your computer and ensure it is seen in the Stream Deck Control app. Next, open the Oria Control desktop app, and remember it always needs to be active when using a Stream Deck, either with the window open or minimized, so make sure this is launched before continuing setup. On first launch of the latest version of the Oria Control app, a dialog window will appear prompting you to install the Stream Deck Oria plugin. By clicking on the Install Plugin button, this will initiate the process and hand off to the Stream Deck Control app, which will ask you to confirm installing pre-configured Stream Deck profiles at the same time as installing the Oria Stream Deck plugin. To initiate this process at any time, with the Oria Control app as the focus, go to the Help menu and press Install Stream Deck plugin. Alternatively, you can download the latest version of the Oria Control plugin from the Elgato marketplace, as well as the pre-configured Stream Deck profiles. Once this is installed, from the Stream Deck app you have access to controls for volume, profile switching and more, either by adding individual elements to your control layout or by selecting the provided profiles from Audient. From there, you should be ready to control your ORIA Mini in a new, powerful way. Alongside the Oria iPad remote app, this should give you the power and flexibility to control your mixes with ease and precision. For more information on ORIA Mini, please make sure to watch some of our other videos or visit the ORIA Mini page on our website. If you found this video useful, please give it a like. If you have any questions about ORIA Mini, then please leave a comment or get in touch with our support team, and don't forget to subscribe for more Audient news and video content.